Welcome to Light from Above. My name is David Kenney. Glad you could be with us on the program today. We're looking at a series of lessons about questions, and not just any set of questions. These are questions that Jesus asked, and he asked some very fascinating questions and ones that have a lot of great lessons. Jesus has often been called the master teacher, and his teaching was just phenomenal, and there's a lot of things in there that we could spend our time on. So we sort of focused a little bit on the questions that he asked. And one of the questions he asked has to relate to salt. And, me, I like sugar, but, for me, pass the salt. I really like salty things. And I was looking at Morton Salt's website. We have a Morton Salt plant not too far from here. And they have a really good website, and they have some interesting statistics or facts about salt. And I found some others too, but let me share with you some of the things that they report. The first written record of salt is believed to be in the book of Job, and that's in Job 6:6. The word salt comes from the Latin word salarium, and it's a sum given to Roman soldiers to buy salt. They would sometimes pay people in salt, and that's where we get our word salary from. Also, the expression, he is not worth his salt, comes from the slave trade and exchanging slaves for salt. So you have that too. Salt was so valuable, Christopher Columbus was instructed to find and bring back large sums of salt on his journey. Even in the Da Vinci's painting, The Last Supper, you could see Judas because the salt shakers sort of tipped over. And that was an omen of bad luck. And so you can even see that in that painting. And, some people say, you can survive without money. You can survive without love. You can survive without chocolate, but you cannot survive without salt. In our day and age, we have salt all over the place. Matter of fact, it's, it'll be in the bottom of our desk drawers. I mean, it's all over the place, it seems like. And it's hard to us to imagine that there was a day, and maybe some places in our world, where, salt, empires rose and fell in relation to salt. Strong empires had strong supplies of salt. That's how important it was in the ancient times. And it's still important today. We just happen to have a lot of it, and sometimes we take that for granted. But Jesus asked this question, if salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? That's the question that he asked. And he noticed there that it's recorded in 3 different places in the Gospels. Now, I'll show you this chart of this harmony of the Gospels, and sometimes he uses the same question. It's all in all 3 accounts, but in this case, he asked this question on 3 different occasions. And on this harmony, it shows you that. One time he uses it at the Sermon on the Mount. And then he also uses it, who is the greatest? And then he also uses it in discipleship. And if you look on that chart at the locations there, you'll see there's different locations involved. And each one of these different locations and each of these different circumstances and talks has these 3 different passages. And so it's important that we note that. Now, it tells us here in the account in Luke that he's in Perea. Well, where is Perea at? Well, here's a map that'll show you where Perea is at. On this map here, it shows you that you have Galilee, and then you have Perea. And so, sometimes we're not exactly sure exactly where these places are. So I thought I'd bring that map to you, and you could sort of take a look at it. But Galilee and Perea are separated by about 20 miles. Capernaum was a city, but Perea was a large territory. Capernaum was in the territory called Galilee. Galilee would be comparable to Perea. So that's what's going on. Now, when you talk about salt, salt has a lot of different applications. Now, I'm not talking about for cooking, but it has spiritual applications. I have a very large dictionary in my library called the Dictionary of Biblical Imagery. And I went and I looked for the definition for its entry about salt. And it's really long. And I thought I would show you just a little bit what it says here. I brought this quote in for you to take a look at. But here's some things I'll read to you from the Biblical Imagery Dictionary. It says, salt has literally hundreds of uses. Like other natural compounds, salt could be used negatively or positively. Biblical writers are well aware of salt's properties, associating it with the images of seasoning, preserving, and purifying. In Colossians 4:6, Paul makes the statement, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned as it were with salt. So salt's very important. And this dictionary of biblical imagery, it really brings out a lot of these different things that we can think about. But let's take a look at the three passages in the New Testament where this question occurs. And I'm going to go ahead and put all three of them up in parallel so you can see them. And these are in Matthew chapter 5, 13, also in Mark chapter 9, 49 through 50, and Luke 14, 34 through 35. Now, as I mentioned, salt was very important in the world at this time. And I'll leave the chart up there for you for a minute. Let me read to you a little bit about how important salt was in the days of Christ in this area of the country. This comes from the fourfold gospel. It makes this statement: salt has been used from time immemorial as an agent in the preservation of meats. The multitudes which heard Jesus were familiar with its use in curing fish. The pickled fish of Galilee were known throughout the Roman world, one writer wrote. It is worthy to note that the salt of Palestine gathered from the marshes was not pure. Because of the foreign substances in it, it loses its savor and becomes insipid and useless when exposed to the sun and air, or when permitted for any considerable time to come in contact with the ground. But pure salt does not lose its savor. The verse teaches that God's people keep the world from putrefaction and corruption. There was not salt enough in the antediluvian world to save it from the flood, in Sodom to save it from the fire, nor in Canaan to preserve its people from destruction. It also teaches, as does experience, that a disciple may lose those qualities which make him salt. Now, Jesus was able to use everyday objects and teach great spiritual truths. That's a lot of what the parables are. One of the hallmarks of Jesus' parables was he would take like the grain of a mustard seed, or you talk about a sower that goes out and sows seed. He would use the drag net or a net, a fisher's net. He had all these objects that he would use, and he would tell people, here's the physical applications of them, but let me share with you some spiritual things about it. Jesus also did that with salt. Let me read you some of the passages we had up there. You are the salt of the earth, but the salt loses its flavor. How shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing, but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. For every one will be seasoned with fire, and every sacrifice will be seasoned with salt. Salt is good, but if the salt loses its flavor, how will you season it? Have salt in yourselves, and have peace with one another. And the other one, salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is neither fit for the land nor for the dunghill, but men throw it out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Jesus is really emphasizing on his disciples and people that heard him, and us too, our influence. This really goes to influence. Some people, they fail to realize some people they're always looking for other people to be a positive influence on them. But let me ask you, how often are we a positive influence on others? How often do we do that? Some people, they're always looking for people to pick them up and to lift them up. And we should do everything we can to help those people. I'm not minimizing that. What I'm asking is, are we salt? Are we salt? Do we help people? Do we strengthen them? If we lose our Christianity, if we fill our lives with a bunch of hypocrisy, if we just become like the world, what difference are we? And that's what Jesus is trying to get these disciples to know. And we need to know. We love salt. It's a great thing. As I mentioned before, nations rose and fell based on their quantities that they had of salt. The church will open or close its doors based on the quality of the salt of its members and the quantity of it as well. We have to be salt. We have to use our influence. Sometimes we use our influence always in a negative kind of sense. Sometimes we do that. And sometimes, you'll hear people say, well, they need to hear this, so I told them. Well, that may be true, but maybe we need to think more about being salt in people's lives, to enrich their lives, to be a blessing to their lives. I'm on Facebook, and I have a lot of friends on Facebook. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I guess, I don't know, I didn't notice it before, or I didn't fail to notice it before, but I guess with Facebook and these social media things, it really gets amplified before your face. There's been times I know people who've lost parents, and they grieve, and they're sorrowful for it. And other friends that I have connections, on Facebook they're all friends, but connections. Sometimes I don't even know some of these people firsthand. But they're having a great celebration. Maybe a child is born. And their lives are great. And I'm friends with both of these people, these kinds of people. And I'm like, but I have one avenue in Facebook I post things to. Now, I could talk to the person who's lost loved ones, and I could talk to the person who's had children, and I could talk to them separately. But, the whole idea of social media, a lot of it is sharing with everybody, all your friends, your experiences, and everything that goes along with that. Well, how do you be salt to someone who is grieving the loss of a loved one, or to someone whose child is struggling with issues, or maybe they've lost their child? Or someone who has a child come into the world. Maybe they get a new job, a new promotion. You have all these different people and all these different things that are going on. And it's just sort of all happening around you. How do you deal with that? How do you, how do you cope with that kind of thing? How can you be an influence on that? Well, you have to be salt. You have to be salt. You have to recognize that, salt isn't just dumped out by the dump truck load. Sometimes it's in a shaker. You have to have proportion. You have to have judgment. You have to have tact when you talk to people. Social media, it's interesting. I've had friends that, they'll have some traumatic event happen in their life. And, unless you're, at least the way, I haven't figured out how to improve this, and this may be a fault of my own, but sometimes I miss it. I'll miss it in the news feed, and it'll go right by me. And they'll have this hugely traumatic event happen in their lives. And they'll be upset that somebody didn't say anything about it. What are they looking for? They're looking for salt. They're looking for salt. They're looking for someone to help them. So social media, it has its own little challenges, but I want you to, not so much this is a lesson about social media, as it is to realize that we have within ourselves the ability to be a great blessing to other people. That we're like that salt. And we need to make sure that our lives are such that when people look at us, they'll say, that person is worth their salt. That person is a good person. They may not know about every circumstance I'm going through. They may have missed it. And those things happen sometimes. But if they know who you are through the course of your life, they're going to recognize that. And so it's important that we're consistent with our example with people so they know. Because someday, it may not be their parent that died. It might be our parent. Happened to me. Lost my father. It's traumatic. And I look at the news feed and I see the people that are, they're exciting and they're celebrating these different things, and it's hard to really be excited. But I'm supposed to try to do that even then. There are things to be happy about and excited about. I need to be happy and excited for those people, even when I myself may not feel like doing all that celebration. Salt, it's our influence. Do we really think about the influence that we have on other people? Do we really look at the opportunity to be a comfort to people's lives or a word of encouragement? When we sit down to eat at our house, if the salt shaker is not there, my son, if not me, will say, where's the salt? We want the salt there. And my wife may say, the food has enough salt on it. My mom used to say that to me all the time. I'd be saying, where's the salt at? I want some salt. I like to taste it, right on top of the food. I really like salt. Then my mom would say, David, there is enough salt there, but I would still want it there. You see, that's the kind of person we need to be. We need to be that kind of person in other people's lives. We may not be able to be at beck and call for every person. But I hope, for myself anyway, and I hope you feel this way too, that for people, they would rather have me at their table than they would to cast me away. I want to be a blessing to people. I want to help them in things that they're struggling with. I want to help them when they're grieving. And I want to celebrate with them when they have happy, celebratory things that are going on in their lives. Salt is so important. It really goes to influence. Now, when I was baptized by my father several years ago, they gave me a little book, and this is by R.B. Sweet, and it's called Now That I'm a Christian. And I remember reading and studying that book, and it's an excellent little book. It's not very big, it's just a little pamphlet, but he gives you some questions for you to think about. And there's a cover of actually my copy of the book. I just scanned it and put it up there. But these are some questions to consider being salt and light in our daily lives. And I really, I'm going really slow here because I really want you to think about your influence. And I really want you to really think about these questions. And here's the questions. Is the practice questionable in my own mind? I probably shouldn't be doing that. Well, if you probably shouldn't be doing it, then you know you shouldn't be doing it. Is it questionable? Think about it before you do it. Does it destroy my identity as a Christian? You could do all kinds of things, and people may say, oh, he's at the ball game, or he's at the football game, and there may be nothing about that. But you start ordering alcohol, or getting drunk, or swearing, or who knows what else happens at some of those events these days, you're destroying your identity as a Christian. I mean, does it destroy my identity as a Christian? If you're not going to be salt and light if you're doing that kind of thing. Does it have a weakening influence on others? I wish people would really think about that. It doesn't hurt me. It's my own body. I could do whatever I want to. But are they hurting somebody else? Or number 4, is it destructive to my body? It is. When I was in junior high, and I went to junior high in West Virginia, I can remember our health teachers telling us very, very plainly that marijuana was a destructive drug and you should stay away from it. And if you get involved in it, they don't call it dope for a reason. It's dope. And if you keep using it, that's what they're going to be calling you. I can't believe that we have states in our beloved United States, including the state of Ohio, that is considering that question. I can't believe they're considering it. And the idea, there's some states, they've already legalized it. And I'm not talking about medicinal use of marijuana. Some people say, well, it's a good, I'm not talking about medicine. I'm not talking about a doctor prescribing it. I'm not talking about that. No, I'm talking about recreational use. Marijuana, as I was taught in school, and this is back in 1977, 78, you think it changed? I was taught it's a recreational drug, it's an illegal drug, and it's a gateway drug. Well, what's that mean? Well, once you involve yourself in it, you go on to other harder substances, like cocaine or heroin. Stay away from that stuff. Stay away from it. Who knows how many families have been haunted by substances that would harm your body. The best thing to do, stay away from it. Back to the list of questions. Does it conflict with my duty as a Christian? Does it lead to a conflict with that? Does it cultivate inordinate fleshly appetites? Does it bring me under weakening influence and association? You know, you may say, well, there's no problem with me going to a bar as long as I don't drink. Well, Jesus, he ate with sinners and drunkards and all that. Well, that's true. But you need to give thought about, some of these places and what are people going to assume about you? You need to give it some discretion before you go there. It's a question you need to ask yourself if you are trying to be salt and light. Does it bring upon me an unequal yoke and place me at a disadvantage in serving the Lord? Now, that's something that people need to think about, especially in marriage. You need to think about your spouse that you're going to marry. Are they a faithful Christian? They're going to have influence too. You influence him or her and vice versa. Hey, think about that. When we think about the idea if salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? I came across this quote. I'll tell you who it is after I give you the statement. A return to first principles in a republic is sometimes caused by the simple virtues of one man. His good example has much an influence that the good men strive to imitate him, and the wicked are ashamed to lead a life so contrary to his example. We need more people, more men and more women and more young people that are salt, and they take a stand and they do what is right, and they will be able to fight some of this stuff that's coming down the pike. The person that said that? Niccolo Machiavelli, author of The Prince. See, this principle, we know it to be true. We know it to be true. I came across this poem that I've known for years, and I looked it up, and I want to close by reading it to you. It's called The World's Bible, and it's by Andy Johnson Flint. It says, Christ has no hands but our hands to do his work today. He has no feet but our feet to lead men in his way. He has no tongue but our tongue to tell men how he died. He has no help but our help to bring them to his side. We are the only Bible the careless world will read. We are the sinner's gospel. We are the scoffer's creed. We are the Lord's last message given in deed and word. What if the type is crooked? What if the print is blurred? What if our hands are busy with other work than his? What if our feet are walking where sin's allurement is? What if our tongues are speaking of things his lips would spurn? How can we hope to help him and hasten his return? There's a lot of people in Wadsworth, Ohio that we care about. A lot of people in the state of Ohio that we care about. And our nation. And the world. In Wadsworth, I'd like to know how many copies of the Scriptures we actually have in relation to the population that we have. I think that would be very frightening if you really thought about it. We have Bibles, probably like we have salt shakers, all over the place. But if people don't read it, it's not going to do them any good. They have to read it. And we want people to know what the Bible says. Well, how are we going to get them there? Could we just say, oh, well, you know what, it's in there, read it. You're on your own. They have to read it, learn it. But we have to show it to them too. We have to live it in our lives. We have to be the kind of example for Christ that is an influence on others, that's a blessing to others. If salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? Thanks for watching our program today. Before we close our program today, we'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly, so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. Don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, it has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people, or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And the key word's faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.